This is Brycey Thompson's speech, and we are in attendance.
Hi, my name is Brycey Thompson. Have you ever been sad or uninterested to do anything? I mean, for days on end, even months, and you didn't necessarily know why? Today I will be talking about depression and what it really means to experience it. The first thing I will discuss is what depression is and what causes it, what it means to experience depression, and finally, what is done to help this mental illness. I'm not here to diagnose anyone, but it is good to understand depression, being that it is a common disease that can affect anyone regardless of race, social class, or status. Depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. Major depressive disorder is when those feelings are prolonged for an extended period of time, classified as a major depressive episode. Everyone has dealt with something that has made them sad. Sadness is a spectrum, with depression being on that spectrum. Smith states, sometimes a teenager or child may show sadness by becoming angered or annoyed, and a depressed person has several other symptoms, such as feelings of worthlessness, thoughts of death, and changes in eating, sleeping, thinking, movement, and energy level. Usually people that experience trauma or feelings of loneliness are more susceptible to depression. So you see, depression has the ability to make you feel everything and nothing at all. This is a problem. Now that we know what depression is and what causes it, let's talk about people that experience this mental illness. People who experience depression might say that they feel like they have nothing to offer to the world. This goes along with the feeling of being worthless or that life does not really have any meaning to it. In an article by Maltic, Robinson, and Oakes in 2007, quote, "A consistent feeling in patients with major depressive disorder is a high level of the stress hormone cortisol, which may cause impairment in neuroplasticity and cellular resistance." End quote. This means that the brain may have a difficult time forming new pathways, so people with major depressive disorder can have a hard time doing the smallest of tasks like brushing their teeth or taking a shower. These things can be the hardest to do. Having thoughts of suicide is another experience to depression. Just having the thoughts of dying or thinking about ways to construct a suicide plan is far more serious than we think, even if people seem to be joking around. Some individuals that suffer from depression turn to drugs and alcohol as an alternative to feel better. From David Karp's research of Is It Me or My Meds, he talks about a personal account of someone that has dealt with depression firsthand. He talks about how she would go to a counselor and explain that she would cry a lot of the time. She would stay to herself than to socialize with others. That the people that mattered most to her were her friends, and that her friends would have the same conditions just like her. Lastly, she would tell her counselor that she would self-harm. Self-harm was her way of feeling, that the act would substitute vulnerability for pain. So you see, people who experience this mental illness generally do not know how to cope with their sadness and don't normally talk with others about their situations. The majority have either felt too embarrassed or inadequate to get help. Finally, this leads into what people do to try to help this mental illness. As I've studied this topic, I did not really find a cure. I did find out that there are many ways to help this mental illness without the use of strong medications or harsh therapies. Harsh medications like Xanax, a powerful anti-anxiety drug, and harsh therapies like electroconvulsive therapy that gives you a temporary seizure to reset the brain. Things people do to make them feel better are things such as active mindfulness, medications using compassion, and fixing sleep habits. if we're able to use things that make us feel better, then we can limit our depression to so much. If people put in the time and effort their bodies and mental health needs to succeed, then they can effectively decrease the rate of depression. Doing something is more effective than doing nothing at all. Now that we know what depression is, what causes it, how people experience it, and what can be done to help this illness, now we can easily spot signs in ourselves and spot signs in others that have it. Thank you so much.